Every few years, a TV show comes out that seems to have everyone watching. These mega popular shows immediately saturate pop culture and the media landscape. During the early and mid-2000s, most of the popular shows like Friends, The Office, Grey's Anatomy, Sex and the City, and Desperate Housewives explored the lives and ups and downs of young adults and individuals in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. However, in 2009, a show sang, danced, and exploded its way onto our screens. This show was set in high school and featured wildly individual characters that all attended their high school's Glee club. The show was quickly a ratings, musical, and smash hit success, turning into a global phenomenon. It was everywhere and it felt like everyone was watching Glee and listening to their weekly rendition of a popular song. Glee and its cast were extremely famous in the first few seasons, but now Glee is just as infamous for what happened behind the scenes. Controversies, crimes, and tragedies. Two of Glee's most celebrated cast members have lost their lives in tragic ways. Several main cast members have been wrapped up in dark and deplorable behavior. A string of accusations have also been levied at one of the show's biggest stars, and there's so much more to talk about when it comes to the cast and crew. So today we're going to discuss what happened behind the scenes on Glee, the poor on-set behavior of certain members of the cast, how some fans went too far with their love of the show, the cast members who tragically lost their lives, and the criminal behavior of the cast who had everything, money, power, and fame, and threw it all away to prey on and hurt others. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in to the unbelievable behind-the-scenes story of the pop culture phenomenon, Glee.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, on the show I'm a bad guy, but in real life, I'm the worst guy.
During the first season, Glee almost doubled its ratings, with just shy of 14 million people watching the mid-season premiere, the episode Hello. By the end of the first season, Glee was a global smashing success, hitting it big in both the TV ratings and the music charts. The show was so popular that during the second season, Glee got the coveted After the Super Bowl slot, with the episode The Sue Sylvester Shuffle clocking in a viewership of just shy of 30 million households. On the music side, the Glee cast were also breaking records and earning buckets of money for the Fox network. The Glee cast currently holds the same amount of #1 singles as Elvis Presley, and when the show was airing, they had 25 singles at once on the Hot 100, the same amount as the Beatles. And all of these successes and accolades made global superstars out of the young and completely unknown cast. The network and creators weren't satisfied with the millions and millions being earned from the show, advertising, music, and more, so they developed new and unique ways to earn even more money, like musical tours, movies, and social media campaigns to quadruple down on profits with very little regard for how this would affect the young cast who were already under tremendous pressure and under the microscope of both the public and the press. The first several seasons of Glee, the young cast would shoot extremely long days, working 16 to 17-hour days, 6 days a week.
We haven't stopped. I mean, we started filming the pilot a year and a half ago, and we have not stopped. So it's like every day, 16-hour days, 70-hour weeks.
As they had the added complication of learning songs and dance numbers on top of the regular TV production schedule, plus, of course, the usual press, interviews, and attendance of award shows and events on top of their schedule. When the show would wrap at the end of the season, the cast would then immediately be sent on tour, performing throughout North America, the UK, and Ireland. With the show starting during the infancy of social media platforms, the cast were instructed to make profiles on websites like Twitter and were told that they needed to be interacting and live tweeting with fans.
Twitter literally became a thing when Glee started. We were required to get Twitter accounts and live tweet during the show.
We don't really Twitter about our lives. We only really Twitter about Glee.
It was like the first TV show, I think, that actually grew its audience via Twitter.
We were very much encouraged to use it, and it always felt funny to me.
So safe to say they were all under tremendous pressure, going from pretty average everyday people to suddenly being global stars, being spoken about in the press, and also dealing and interacting with the public and their fans, both in real life and on social media. The vast majority of the cast have all spoken about how difficult it was going from living a pretty normal life to suddenly being on an enormous public stage where not only were they being hounded by paparazzi and fans, but due to their ever-growing platforms on social media, they were being inundated with messages, feedback, criticism, attacks, bullying, toxic fans, and more. Chris Colfer, who played Kurt on the show, has spoken out about how he has PTS Glee due to the show, and while there are some wonderful fans of Glee out there, a small minority took things to dangerous levels, which we'll discuss very shortly. So what exactly was all the hype about? What made Glee so special? Glee had many factors that made it the juggernaut that it was. They had a talented cast, they had popular songs, they had a long list of celebrity guest stars, strong writers, but what really gave it that it factor was how the show made its audience feel. Week after week, Glee fans, known as GLEE'S, turned in and felt represented on screen, and new GLEE'S are still finding the show today as it has a second life on streaming networks. The show is created by Ryan Murphy, Brad Falchuk, and Ian Brennan, and was set at McKinley High in Ohio and focused around the Glee Club at the high school. The original 8 members of the Glee Club were Quinn Fabray, played by Diana Egron, Kurt Hummel, played by Chris Colfer, Finn Hudson, played by Cory Monteith, Mercedes Jones, played by Amber Riley, Artie Abrams, played by Kevin McHale, Rachel Berry, played by Leah Michele, Tina Cohen-Chang, played by Jenna Oshkowitz, and Noah Puckerman, played by Mark Salling. The main cast quickly added 3 additions: Santana Lopez, played by NAYA Rivera, Brittany Pierce, played by Heather Morris, and Mike Chang, played by Harry Shum Jr. Also added to the main cast in the second season were Blaine Anderson, played by Darren Criss, and Sam Evans, played by Cord Overstreet. There also was quite a cast overhaul during the 4th season, which we'll discuss later, with many new cast members being added due to the original cast members graduating. Glee aired on Fox for 6 seasons and was a pop culture phenomenon. Glee truly was one of the last appointment TV shows that prompted water cooler chats at offices. That's all gone by the wayside now that we have streaming and on demand. Despite the show's enormous success throughout the show's production and after, Glee has been surrounded by enormous controversy, several tragedies, serious crimes, heartbreaking abuse, devastation, and as many people claim, a curse. Cory Monteith was born on May 11th, 1982, and he was born in Alberta, Canada. He had a little bit of acting experience before being cast in Glee. He was on a lot of Canadian film shows, lots of CW shows like Smallville, Supernatural, and Kyle XY. He had an abundance of odd jobs, working as a roofer, construction worker, taxi driver, and loads of just odd end jobs. He ended up sending in his tape to Glee despite actually not singing in it and not dancing. He played the drums on like kind of a makeshift drum kit with things around the house.
And what were you doing before all of this?
I played the drums. No, I have no experience whatsoever singing or dancing.
And he was still cast in the lead role because he just came across as really charming in his video and kind of had what they were looking for in a lead for the show. So Cory really was unknown when he was cast, and like I've said in the beginning, most of the cast, pretty much everyone, didn't really have that much experience. Michele obviously had a bit, but everyone wasn't just green, like they were completely unknown. So it was a really big deal when obviously he was cast as Finn Hudson, who was the lead in the show. And if you look back on a lot of the interviews that were done when they were shooting Glee, but it wasn't actually released yet, you can just see the sort of naivety that the cast have, because they really had no idea that the show was going to be as big as it was. And Cory just comes across, I mean, this is throughout all his interviews, as just a really, really sweet guy. I know that obviously you can only see so much in interviews and videos and things like that, but just seeing him in comparison to the millions and millions of other celebrity interviews, like he just comes across so well, and the way he always is with fans and even paparazzi videos. There's a video of him and Michele arriving in LAX, and this has to be like right at the height of Glee, like it looks around season 2, and they're coming down the escalator and they're going out to like a car that's obviously sitting there waiting for them, and you see like Cory's being super nice to the paparazzi, and even when he's getting in the car, he like stops to like shake the hand of the guy who's opening the door, and you can even kind of see the guy who clearly like does this as a living, is probably picking up celebrities all the time. He's kind of a bit like, whoa, I'm not used to this. And I just cannot say enough good things about how Cory comes across on video, on camera. And there is someone that I actually worked with who did work on Glee, and they just had nothing but amazing things to say about Cory and how down to earth he was, how he just was like such a nice person and really was a great person to work with. So I just wanted to put that little anecdotal evidence in there too. So in the beginning of Glee, pretty much straight away, the show was a huge success, and they really didn't have any sort of roadmap for how things were going to go with the show. And Cory, obviously, like all the cast, was under a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, because it was not only a TV production, but they were having to do all these song and dance numbers and learn them and make sure that they all looked perfect, go and record them in the studios. There was a lot going on with this show. For the earlier seasons, Cory kept a lot of his past under wraps because he had had substance abuse in his teenage years, and then with Glee being so successful, he saw it as an opportunity to be open about his past and to be able to try and reach people who were maybe going through the same thing, teenagers going through the same thing, and showing them, you know, I went through this and I was able to get myself out of it and become very successful. So he did begin opening up about his past struggles when Glee was going into its second and third seasons. And as I've said a few times in this video, the cast was under tremendous pressure, and as that was kind of compounding as the show's going on, around about the end of the second season, beginning of the third season, Cory began to struggle a bit, and it started to affect kind of everything in his life, including work. Cory was really struggling with the enormous amount of fame that just pretty much arrived overnight in his life, and also the lack of privacy that came with that fame. So when he was struggling, he decided to check himself into rehab, which of course is the smart thing to do. And he went into a facility on March 31st, 2013 and didn't check out until April 26, having completed the entire program. Given that Cory had been written out of the end of the third season, and when he got out of rehab, it was the end of April, so the show was going into hiatus, Cory decided to stay in Canada, and he was there throughout the summer, spending time with his family and friends. On July 13th, 2013, Cory was supposed to check out of the hotel he was staying at, but but the staff became concerned when he hadn't checked out by the checkout time, and they ended up opening the door to his hotel room to check on him, and they sadly found Cory deceased in his hotel room. Cory had accidentally OD'd on a combination of codeine, heroin, morphine, and alcohol. The medical examiner ruled that this was an accidental OD and there was no foul play. What they think happened is that because Cory went to rehab and he had abstained from any substances for that long period of time, they think it had lowered his tolerance, and when he's gone to ingest these drugs, that he's taken them at the levels that he would normally take, and his body just couldn't handle it because his tolerance had been lowered due to his stint in rehab. Obviously, this was horrendous news to Cory's family, friends, his girlfriend, co-star Michele, the whole Glee cast, all his friends on the set, and all the fans around the world. They ended up not really knowing what to do. So the show's creator, Ryan Murphy, asked Michele, Cory's girlfriend and another star of the show, what to do. He gave her 3 options. The first option was to take a small 2-week break and then go back, to end the show completely and indefinitely, or the third option was to take a longer extended break and then go back sometime in January. Obviously, this was happening in the summer, and they were set to go back to work on Glee in just a few weeks so that they'd be ready for the premiere during the normal TV schedule, September, October time. So Leah ended up deciding the first option, to take 2 weeks off and then go back, and that's what they did. They pushed the premiere 1 week. When they went back for the 4th season, they ended up dedicating an episode to Cory's character Finn Hudson, where he passes away, and all of the characters mourn Finn on screen. Over the next year, Cory was memorialized in a lot of ways on award shows, at places like the Teen Choice Awards when Glee won, and just in other touching ways. Obviously, the show was really never the same after this, and it was just a really devastating loss for everybody that was involved with the show and all of the fans who watched it. Chris Colfer was born on May 27th, 1990 in Clovis, California. Chris was only 19 years old when he was cast as Kurt Hummel on Glee, and he had no experience whatsoever being a public figure or being in mainstream television prior to being cast on Glee. I'm sure there were a lot of people helping this young cast transition from everyday people to be extremely famous people. But in hindsight, just like Cory, it does seem as though there could have been a lot more done to try and help these people transition and also to protect them. As per usual, it seems as though the network and most people associated with the show saw dollar signs and wanted to wring the cast out for every single dollar that they possibly could. This is blatant in the way that they overscheduled all of the cast, had very little regard for their safety, and in many ways threw them out to the public with very little protection. So while I was doing research, I found these videos. I think they must have originally been on like a DVD special or for something specific like that, because basically they were videos from each of the cast members, and the production or Fox must have given them these little cameras that were like little vlogging cameras. Obviously they're 2009 quality, but they gave all of the cast them when they were going from LA to New York for the Fox upfronts. In case you know what the upfronts are, basically they're done prior to all of the new shows coming out, and each network has their own upfront. I mean, now a lot of the streaming networks have them too, and they will basically show all of the new shows, all the cast come, you can ask them questions, and they're basically saying, this is our full lineup and these are all the new shows. They do sometimes have like members from their big shows come back. I did talk about this in my That 70s show, which is also a Fox show, and talked about the two Masterson brothers and what they got up to in the Fox upfronts. But this was obviously the first time that any of the Glee cast were going to anything like that. And these videos really show kind of the theme that I'm trying to get across in this video, that this extremely young cast that was unknown and had no experience were just thrown to the wolves basically, because they didn't really seem to give them any guidance. And you can see how naive they are. And I don't mean that in like a mean way or anything. Anybody who's not been on a TV show and been famous before would be naive about this stuff, because all of the kids, you see them, they've worked on the show. They say this in the videos. They worked on the show till 3 a.m. 5 a.m. they get a flight to New York, and all of them are filming in the airport. They're filming the cab journey. And while they're riding to go to the hotel to check in, to then go to rehearsal, they all film all these Glee posters that are up all over the city. And you can see how genuinely happy and like surprised and blown away they are that they've never seen anything like this before.
Oh my God. Oh my God, there we are. I got it. Wow. That was crazy.
And these videos really get across just how they had no idea what was about to come. And obviously they had an amazing experience in some ways. Like, they're incredibly rich, incredibly famous. Most people would want that. But there is another side to it, with people, that small amount of the audience, going too far. And that is what we're really going to discuss here with Chris COLFER, because there was a portion of the audience that went too far. And when you're talking about an audience of millions and millions and millions of people, that small portion can be quite loud and can be quite a lot of people. And I'm going to give some examples here of situations where fans of the show did go too far. So in the beginning of Glee, they actually used to go and film at two physical locations. They used to go to a high school in Burbank and a high school in Long Beach. Later, they did build like a set that they just went to work at on the Paramount Pictures lot. But this incident happened when they hadn't really thought too much into the physical safety of the stars, because this show was so huge that people really would do anything to get to the actors. And they had some fans of Chris COLFER that literally forced their way onto the set, ran up to him and kissed him, and then ran off. So they actually had to build like a tunnel for the cast to go through when they were going from like their trailers to set, so that people couldn't get at them. But the majority of instances of fans going too far was with Chris and another character, Blaine, played by Darren Criss, and they played love interests on the show. So Chris was only 19 when he was cast, and he said in interviews that he was just out to himself. Like, he hadn't even told his parents, family, friends, nobody.
I was not out to anyone. I was not out in high school. I was barely out to myself. And then like suddenly, like I'm literally going from a nobody in this small town where I'm too afraid to admit the truth about myself, to then suddenly being an openly gay teenager on network television.
And a lot of people, because he was playing a gay character, were constantly questioning about his sexuality. And again, this is 2009. And one of the biggest things about Glee was that people were seeing themselves represented on screen, and people really identified with Chris's character Kurt, and then later Naya Rivera's character Santana, and Heather Morris's character Brittany, that were in a same-sex relationship as well. But when it came to Chris, he was being constantly questioned by the press, and he wasn't there yet. He wasn't comfortable yet with being out, and it's a very personal thing when someone decides to come out or not. So Chris was having a conversation with the advocate, and they actually ended up outing him because they misunderstood something that he said. The advocate has actually done this before, at least one other time that I know of. There's probably more, because and there is a Glee connection to it too, because Gwyneth Paltrow's cousin, Kate Manning, who was on the L Word, and of course Gwyneth Paltrow was on Glee, was outed in The Advocate pretty much the same way. They interviewed another actress from the L Word, Jennifer Beals, and she accidentally outed Kate in front of an Advocate reporter, and they ended up printing it when she wasn't out yet. She was a little bit older. She was in her like mid-20s, but still, it's still really should be the person's decision when they decide to come out.
During like the first round of press for the first season, I did an interview with publication. I'll say a publication, and they asked me questions about the character, about the show. Not one single question about me. And the article that was published was basically like, Chris Colfer, this out and proud young kid, and I was like 18, and I hadn't even had a conversation with my parents or myself, or so it was just terrifying, and I was devastated because it was just I wasn't ready. I think it's like, I think the whole thing with the what's his name from Heartbreakers, the show that thing that just happened right now. Heartstopper. Yeah, that absolutely broke my heart, because essentially the same thing happened to me about 15 years ago. We were the same age.
Right. I immediately thought of you when that happened.
When it happened to me, it was very much like I deserved it. Yeah. It was crickets, and I deserved it.
Like what you signed up for. Like
right, I know what I signed up for. It was obvious, so therefore I had no reason to be upset about it.
So that happened to Chris, and that was obviously one of the most painful things in the beginning of Glee, because all these people are talking about him and these very personal things. And then he also won a Golden Globe for his portrayal of Kurt, which put even more of a spotlight on him. Then Darren Criss's character Blaine came on the show, and that's when people began aggressively shipping these characters. A small portion of the audience felt so strongly about their relationship that they wanted Chris, the real person, and Darren, the real person, to be together in real life. And they went about this in a very, very aggressive and wrong way. They were harassing Chris's real life boyfriend, trying to get him fired from his job, trying to get them to break up, like doing really depraved things. And I think it was similar on Darren Criss's end.
They got a hold of my boyfriend's email, and they signed him up for like all kinds of crazy websites, like illegal things. Illegal things.
They shut down his blog.
They shut down. He had a blog from college that they got shut down. And one time I got a tweet from someone that said, "You need to check your boyfriend's emails." And so I was like, "Will, you want to check your emails?" And they'd signed him up for AshleyMadison.com, which is a straight cheating website. So it's like they were almost there. They're almost there, but they tried to get him fired from his job.
It was like for real.
Yeah, he was working for Robert Zemeckis at the time, and his creative executives got all these emails and messages from these people like saying lies about him, trying to get him fired, and his mom and his sisters got like boxes of hair in the mail, like with notes that say like, how dare you be part of this lie? Yeah, we know the truth, and it drove me nuts.
And it just was a lot to go through at such a young age when you're in the public eye and you've recently been outed by a magazine. That's kind of a lot to deal with. And Chris now says he has PTS Glee, which I can't really blame him for that.
Yeah, PTS Glee.
PTS Glee. Yeah, I'm working on some PTS Glee.
In recent years, Chris has stepped out of the acting spotlight, with his last big acting project being the 2016 Absolutely Fabulous movie that he was handpicked for the part after he invited star Jennifer Saunders to one of the Glee concerts in the UK. Chris still does act occasionally, but has been way more focused on his writing. After he won his Golden Globe for Glee, he was approached about doing an autobiography, but given that he was only 19 at the time, Chris didn't think this was a great idea.
And Little Brown signed me for a 2-book deal, and so I've been working on that literally every minute I can, in between scenes, at home, on the weekends. It's been my life.
Instead, he pitched to the literary agency that he would write a novel that he'd always wanted to write. Chris has gone on to great success in the literary world, including several books on the New York Times bestsellers list.
Yeah. Where were you when you found out that you were a New York Times bestselling author?
I was at Pier 39 in San Francisco because I was doing signings there. And I was so excited because I my day was made because I was seeing the seals. And I love animals. And I was like, oh, it doesn't get better than this. And then my people pulled me aside and were like, guess what? I'm like, what? Do I get to touch the seals? And they were like, you're a New York Times bestselling author. I was like, what do you mean?
Just like the rest of the cast, Melissa Benoist and Blake Jenner were both thrown into the spotlight when they joined Glee during its 4th season. Melissa was born on October 4th, 1988 in Houston, Texas, and Blake was born on August 27th, 1992 in Miami, Florida. Melissa was cast during the 4th season to replace some of the graduating class of McKinley High. Blake actually won his part after appearing on the reality show The Glee Project. When they initially met, Melissa wasn't interested in Blake due to him being 4 years younger than her, and in your early to mid-20s, 4 years can be quite the difference. Whereas, for example, somebody who was maybe 30 dating someone who was 34, it's not really any different. Blake was very immature, and this is definitely highlighted when you look at any behind the scenes segments that they've done for the show. Due to the fact Blake's personality was exposed via the reality show format of the Glee Project, one other thing that was noticeable to audiences was Blake's extreme temper. Despite the fact Melissa wasn't originally interested in Blake, they became friends due to working such long hours together on Glee. Melissa and Blake got married very quickly, and as Melissa exposed years later after divorcing Jenner, Blake Jenner emotionally and physically abused Melissa Benoist throughout their marriage. Jenner was extremely violent and frequently attacked her, and normally these sort of accusations, I would say allegedly or according to Melissa, but Blake Jenner himself has admitted to all of this now. Jenner was violent many times with Melissa, once even causing permanent injuries. Jenner threw his iPhone with full force at Melissa's face, broke her nose, and caused skin breaks that required stitches, and this caused so much damage to her eye that her iris was torn, and for the rest of her life, one pupil is permanently dilated. While they were married, Jenner tried to control everything Melissa did, isolating her from her family and friends, attacking her, and also trying to intervene with her work. Jenner did not want Melissa having romantic storylines or even speaking to or being around other men, like cast members and crew. After the 4th season, Melissa and Blake both went down to recurring cast members, and then they did not return for the 6th season. Blake did guest star for 2 episodes, but Melissa did not appear at all in the final season of Glee as she had moved on to a new project. She had been cast in the CBS show Supergirl as the titular character. During the 1st season of Supergirl, the release was a huge deal, with billboards all over LA, New York, and other cities, and Jenner clearly resented Melissa's success and even pressured her to get him a part on the show, with Jenner appearing in an episode in the 1st season of Supergirl playing the son of Clarissa Flockhart's character, Cat Grant. After the 1st season, the show moved to the CW, which required production to move from Los Angeles to Vancouver. Moving to Vancouver in the summer of 2016 seemed to give Melissa a chance to see she needed to get away from Jenner, and at the tail end of 2016, she filed for divorce. The divorce was finalized the following year in December 2017. In November 2019, Melissa released a video on Instagram detailing the truth about her relationship with Jenner. She went on to explain everything she endured, including Jenner's constant violent attacks. She does not actually name Blake Jenner, but gives several very specific details that make it irrefutable that she is discussing anyone but Blake Jenner. Almost 1 year later, in October 2020, after being dropped from all of his projects and heavily moderating his social media, Blake Jenner wrote a lengthy statement on his social media where he admitted to everything that Benoist had alleged. Jenner admitted to his violence, the constant physical attacks, that he is the one who caused her eye injury, and he confirmed he inflicted emotional and physical abuse throughout their relationship and marriage. Benoist played Supergirl from 2015 to 2021, also crossing over for several special episodes with Arrow, Batwoman, and The Flash, which starred Grant Gustin, another Glee alumni. Benoist met Chris Wood when he was cast on the second season of Supergirl, and the two went on to date, later getting engaged and getting married in 2019. In March 2020, they announced they were expecting their first child, with the baby being born in September 2020. Since Benoist released her video exposing what Jenner did to her, Jenner has been replaced on all of his projects and has not got any work except for one straight-to-video on-demand movie titled Paradise City. Paradise City has a 3.4 out of 10 review on IMDb, a 14% positive rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and received particularly scathing reviews. A few minor clarifications, addendums, and extra bits of info, because there's nothing like adding in a video clip at 3:52 a.m. on the day that you're going to post the video. So when this all happened in real time and Melissa released her video with her story of what happened in their relationship, Blake Jenner didn't say anything at all. Like, no comment, nothing. He closed down his Instagram comments after a few days because they were overrun with people, calling him out and talking about Melissa's video and the allegations. About a year later, he ends up posting this 6-page notes app. It's supposed to be an apology, but it is not. And basically the entire thing can be summed up as saying he claims that what Melissa said he did, she did to him. So he says all this stuff about how Melissa wouldn't let him work with women, she wouldn't let him speak to women, be around women, because she would attack him. And then he goes into clarifying and discussing the iPhone permanent face injury situation. And he says that he lost his temper momentarily and threw the iPhone at the wall, and it accidentally hit her in the face. He does not talk about the numerous other times that he harmed her or injured her or hit her, because it was so prevalent that medical staff confronted her when she was at the hospital for another injury that wasn't the face eye injury, and it was bad enough that there's people confronting her about it. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the reason that Melissa was kind of able to get out of all of this is because her friend confronted her about it, because she was seeing a pattern, and Melissa constantly covered in cuts and bruises and injuries. So that's not just one iPhone incident that you've lost your temper. This is an ongoing pattern of behavior. Regarding everything else, he pretty much is just operating business as usual now. However, his Instagram comments are still closed. He doesn't have them open at all. But there is a few comments on, he has a lot of thirst trap posts without a shirt on, and those posts have 20-25 comments on them, and I think he has the feature turned on Instagram where only people that you are following can comment. And in order for those thirst trap responses, they're definitely fan accounts, he has to be following them. So I think he has gone to say the top 20 Blake Jenner stan accounts and followed them so that they can comment and then no one else can. I know I just mentioned he had that Paradise Now project. There was one other project that he's done recently that it wasn't on IMDb for some reason, but it is an Amazon video on demand, direct released, absolute bottom of the barrel. You know the ones I mean. The Lifetime couldn't pay me to watch them. Not great. And the final thing is that this is a very recent post. He only posted it a week ago, because when I went to do the vast majority of the research for this video and I looked at his Instagram then, it wasn't there then. But he now is sober and he has a 1-year sober chip. So hopefully he continues with that and stays sober. I did actually work with someone who has worked with him before, and a little tip, I I obviously don't name those people usually, but if you go to my Instagram and whomever I'm talking about Instagram and compare the people that are following both of us, usually you can figure out which crew member I'm talking about in my videos. But honestly, I didn't hear anything that I or like the general public didn't know. He has a temper. He has a problem with alcohol, and I think that he is probably going to start getting a bit desperate soon for projects, because his problem too is that he has no mainstream projects, attention, anything like that. Like, nobody is going to want to hire him, but he can't even use social media to try and like keep himself relevant, or even do something like YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, because he has his comments turned off, and he just cannot use basically Instagram at all, because anything he does, he's going to have people come down on him like a ton of bricks. So I would be worried if I was him, but I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens there. And of course, the most important thing is it looks like Melissa is living her best life. She seems really happy with Chris Wood, and I know she's working on a couple of projects now too. So back to past me. So I'm not really going to go into detail about the crew members in particular, because there have been a lot of crew members that have passed away, and a lot of them were very private, like nothing was really put out publicly about them. So I don't really think that it's something that should really be dove into. They're not public figures, apart from one crew member who they actually put out information in letters prior to their death that they wanted to be known to the public. And they also have extremely famous siblings, so it has been spoken about in the media and online. So the crew member I want to discuss is Nancy Motz, and she was a production assistant on Glee. Nancy very sadly ended up taking her own life, and she drowned in the bath after taking a mixture of prescription and non-prescription medication. There was a lot of discussion after Nancy passed away, because she wrote 3 letters, and 2 of which have been published. The first one was to her fiance John, and spoke about him being the love of her life. The second letter was to her family, and that is the one that nobody knows what is inside that letter, because it was written to her very famous siblings and her mother. And the third letter was addressed to everyone, the public, and that letter blamed Nancy's siblings and family for what she ended up doing. She blamed her family for driving her into a very deep depression. And the reason that this was spoken about and put out in the media is because Nancy's sister is Julia Roberts. They share the same mother, they have different fathers. Julia is her older sister, and then her older brother is Eric Roberts, Emma Roberts' dad. And Nancy and Julia did not get along at all. Nancy ended up putting out a series of tweets really saying that Julia was a nightmare and a monster, and one of her well-known tweets was kind of just wanting everyone to know that, in her opinion, America's sweetheart was a bitch. And she put out a lot of stuff like this. She also had sold some stories about Julia Roberts to newspapers, because apparently Julia used to really torture Nancy when she was a teen for being overweight. She did end up getting gastric bypass surgery and dropped a lot of the weight, but she still dealt with a lot of horrible comments from Julia, according to Nancy. Julia Roberts did attend her half-sister's funeral and apparently gave a very strange eulogy, which she opened by saying Nancy is gone and she's not coming coming back. And later on, she said she could just wring Nancy's neck for not waiting to see the joy that comes with mourning. Again, just like Cory Monteith, I don't know these people, but from everything that I've read, it does seem to be like they always had a very strained relationship, and it seems as though the foundation of their relationship was a lot of jealousy, because apparently when they both lived in Georgia, like before Julia Roberts was famous, and Nancy used to train dogs, and the dogs got like parts in movies that apparently Julia couldn't even like get an audition for, and she was jealous of Nancy for that. And then obviously she became a big movie star, and Nancy was jealous of her because of her fame, and she said that it just was Julia torturing her, and she's, you know, this super famous actress that everyone is calling America's sweetheart. Apparently Julia was also jealous of Nancy's relationship with their mother, Betty, because when Julia moved to Los Angeles, Nancy stayed and was the primary caregiver for Betty, so they were really, really close. When Nancy and Betty decided to move to California, Julia, obviously being like a multi-millionaire, set her mom up, but then banned Nancy from coming over and tried to dictate whenever she could come and see her mother. And some of the publications that I read all this information on, they had the text messages that would come from Julia saying, oh, come and see mom at this time, and you better have left by this time, so that they wouldn't obviously see each other. Shortly after they moved to California, Nancy got her production assistant job on Glee. It just seems like a really sad situation, because when Nancy passed away, she wrote in the letter that John, her fiance, should get any of her possessions that he wanted and their dog Lucy. But Julia Roberts didn't want this to happen, and she went after Nancy's estate. They ended up having a lot of this talked about in the media. There was countless and countless articles about this. This all happened in like 2015, 2016. I did end up finding an interview with John from 2020 where he said he got their dog Lucy, but absolutely everything else ended up being taken by Julia and the family. So he pretty much was left with none of Nancy's possessions, and he has a really good job as a location manager for TV. So it's not that he wanted the money or to sell the things, he just wanted the possessions from his fiance who'd passed away. Lea Michele was born on the 29th of August 1986 in the Bronx, New York. She is probably the biggest star that's come out of Glee, and of course, her being in the public spotlight for so many years, there are a lot of rumors, speculation, and discussions about her. While there might be a lot of evidence, some of these discussions don't have a lot of truth behind them, like the rumor that she can't actually read. But there are some things that have followed Lea around for pretty much her entire career, even dating back to when she was a child on Broadway. And I'm of course referring to the fact that pretty much everyone who's worked with her has described her as a nightmare. There have been many people that have come out over the years, from people who their first job ever was in Glee, all the way up to extremely famous people like Kate Hudson, who have spoken out about what a nightmare Lea Michele was to work with. And this goes for cast, crew, pretty much anyone you can think of that had anything to do with one of her projects. The first person to speak out from Glee about Michele's antics was Samantha Ware. Samantha said that Lea made her life a living hell while working on Glee.
There was nothing gradual about it. As soon as she decided that she didn't like me, it was very evident. It was after I did my first performance, that's when it started. The silent treatment, the stare downs, the looks, the comments under her breath, the weird passive aggressiveness. It all built up.
Scores of former co-stars like Amber Riley and Heather Morris, who worked with Lea Michele on the entire run of Glee, have spoken out about how terrible it was to work with her. And even more stars have weighed in on Twitter, with very unproblematic people like Abigail Breslin and Melissa Benoist liking tweets talking about Michele's poor behavior. A lot of people have accused Lea Michele of not only being a nightmare to work with, but of being racist, because she has had terrible stories come out about her ostracizing a lot of Black cast members, including a lot of people who were guest stars or in supporting roles, and Lea has told many of them, you don't belong here, or not letting them sit with her group at lunch, which is this high school? There's many stories like that, and there's even worse ones of her behavior towards background actors or other people in minor roles on Glee, as she would call these background actors and minor guest stars cockroaches. There's also been things that Lea Michele has said to former Black co-stars, like that she'll shit in their wig. And while you can't point at that and say it's explicitly racist, it's not as if she's calling someone a slur, but I just can't imagine that she would say that sort of phrase or use the word wig to insult someone if she was talking to someone like me. Considering how bad some of the stories about Lea Michele are and how universally known it is how terrible she is to work with and deal with, because she's a particular breed of awful when it comes to crew members, I don't think her career has suffered too much because of it. You could say that she hasn't gone on to super mega stardom, but who knows if these accusations or truth about her and how she behaves, because she's a particular breed of awful when it comes to other crew members, that she could have gone on to superstardom, because she is really talented. You can't take that away from her. But the fact is, if you take Ryan Murphy out of the equation, if you're just looking at her talent and working with her, and you have 100 or more other people that are just as talented, just as hardworking, those people, because Hollywood is full of beautiful, talented people, then I'm sure most people will go with someone else, because a lot of casting directors, writers, show producers, executive producers, they may go with an unknown person who's just as talented, or someone who maybe isn't as well known but just as talented, because they don't want to deal with Lea Michele and everything that comes with her, and being nasty to crew members, being horrible to other cast members. That really bogs down a production, and she also makes things very difficult getting the work done. Even myself, I know if I'm going to hire someone, I have two people that are just as smart. I may take the person who doesn't quite have the experience if I know they're going to be easy to work with, I can teach them anything, I have a level of trust with them, rather than someone who you're going to bring in and they might do a good job, but if they're going to basically enter an office or whatever type of situation and cause problems and cause people to headbutt, then it's not really worth it, no matter how talented they are. And it is an interesting thing to discuss because, again, Lea Michele is super talented. She was on Glee for so long, and you would think that she would have an easier transition into another mainstream TV show or even film, but she hasn't really gone on to any huge projects. And I'd bet if you polled most people, they still would associate her with Glee above anything else. Mark Salling was born on August 27th, 1982 in Dallas, Texas. When he was a kid and a teenager, he took on two very small roles in the 90s, one in an episode of Walker, Texas Ranger, and another in Children of the Corn Part 4. So for all intents and purposes, he had virtually no experience in television production when he was cast on Glee in 2009. He did, however, have extensive music experience. He had gone to college for music, and he was making his living before Glee as a guitar instructor. From 2007 to 2010, Mark was dating his Glee co-star NAYA Rivera, and NAYA revealed a good bit about their relationship in her book, Sorry Not Sorry. She actually spoke about how they dated for 3 years, but Mark said in the press and to fans and to everyone that he was single. NAYA also spoke about Mark cheating on her extensively. She detailed a time in her book where she discovered that he had cheated on her, and her friend went and bought a variety of items, including eggs, birdseed, Coke, and other concoctions, and she dumped all of this on Mark's car, and he was out of town, so it was left to bake in the LA heat. And when Mark came home, it just was a sludge that was covering his car. This actually got picked up by the press. Well, a Frankenstein version of it got picked up by the press, and in the press they said NAYA had keyed his Lexus, and in her book NAYA talks about the fact that Mark definitely didn't have a Lexus because he kept his very old car and kept his apartment in a bad part of town well into his time on Glee. Like, he didn't move out of there until the 2nd or 3rd season, I think she said in her book. NAYA also said that Mark knew it was her who did that to his car, but they just never discussed it. In 2010, Mark and NAYA broke up, and then during the 4th season of Glee, Mark was dating another woman, his ex, Roxanne Gorzella, and Roxanne accused him of committing sexual battery on March 25th, 2011. That was during the 2nd season of Glee, at arguably the height of Mark's fame. Although Salling denied the charges, in March 2015, he ended up settling out of court with Gorzella and agreed to pay her $2.7 million. Despite the horrific accusation from Gorzella, things only got worse in 2015. On December 29th, 2015, Mark Salling was arrested at his home in Los Angeles. He actually wouldn't answer the door for the police, and a battering ram had to be used. Also, when the police did force entry into the property, they caught him trying to destroy evidence. Salling was arrested on suspicion of having thousands and thousands, over 50,000 explicit images. The police arrested him after a tip from his ex-girlfriend when Salling had tried to get her to view the images with him. 5 months later, on May 27th, 2016, Salling was officially charged with receiving and possessing explicit child images. He was dropped from all upcoming projects and dropped by his representatives. Due to an abundance of evidence, Salling took a plea deal and pleaded guilty to the possession of the images. It was stated by Salling's lawyer that he was looking to receive 4 to 7 years in prison as part of his plea deal. When released, he would need to register as an offender and enter a treatment program, along with some other conditions to be imposed. There are many people that believe, due to the leniency of the amount of years that he was due to receive in prison and due to the sheer number of images, that Salling was going to turn on some of the other people who were sharing these images between them. Many people think that he was going to turn over the names of other people in Hollywood involved in trading these images. Salling was due to be sentenced on March 7th, 2018. However, on January 30th, 2018, just over a month away from his sentencing, Mark Salling left his house when he was staying with his family, removed his GPS tracker, purchased Sprite, alcohol, and cigarettes. He then walked along a road, walked into a wooded area, and took his own life. His body was found 6 hours later after he was reported missing. Naya Rivera was born in Valencia, California on January 12th, 1987. Naya began working when she was a child. She was a model. She appeared in tons of commercials, including a number of Mattel toy commercials, a Barbie commercial, and she started getting TV roles when she was just a little kid. She was cast in the show The Royal Family, but due to a tragedy on that set, where one of the main cast members passed away, she ended up only being on the show for the one season it aired, and then the show was cancelled due to the tragedy. Naya then went on to star on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. By the time she was getting to her late teens, she was finding it more difficult to get parts, and just prior to being cast in Glee, she actually was considering giving up acting altogether, and Glee was the last audition that she was going to go on. And when she was cast on Glee, it wasn't even supposed to be anything significant. She didn't even have a speaking role when she was cast in the pilot. It was only really her personality, charisma that had them develop the character of Santana. And what's even more wild is this bit character that had this non-speaking role in the pilot went on to not only be a huge part of the show, but to be one of the biggest step forwards in representation, especially when it comes to LGBT characters on TV. And just even a little personal anecdote, which I'll talk about more in a second, the only reason I watched this show was because of Santana and Britney, and because a lot of my ex-girlfriends were big like musical people, and nearly every ex-girlfriend I had loved Glee, so I was forced to watch it a lot of the time. Naya was extremely talented, and just like the other actors, she would go on tour, and she had some amazing songs. I think probably the most well-known is the Valerie one that she absolutely killed. She also performed one of the main songs, If I Die Young, in the Cory MONTEITH dedicated episode, The Quarterback. Even though Glee came out only 15 years ago, when it came out in 2009 between the character of Kurt, Blaine, Santana, and Britney, there just really hadn't been any LGBT representation like this on mainstream TV before, as in teens in high school. I mean, when I was in high school and dating my first girlfriend, there was nothing, like absolutely nothing. And I graduated in 2006, so I was in college when Glee came out, but it still was a huge deal. And even when you were looking back on any representation, I mean, there really was the L Word, which was on Showtime, that had only come out a few years before Glee, and Willow and Tara from Buffy, and maybe some other random characters here and there that were usually killed off within a few short weeks. So Britney and Santana, played by Naya Rivera and Heather Morris, were a huge, massive deal. And I know there's so many people who feel represented and who just even feel seen by that whole thing. And in my opinion, that's why Glee was so successful, because so many people could look and identify with one of the cast members, be it whether they were LGBT or whether they were a drama geek or, you know, loved musicals, or there was something kind of for everyone because it was such a huge cast. And I just really cannot say enough great things about Britney and Santana. And there's one particular amazing scene that Naya did where her character Santana is talking with her grandmother and trying to explain, you know, when I'm with Britney, who's her girlfriend in the show, she's saying, I understand what people are singing about in love songs and what all these, you know, romantic movies and stories are talking about. And I literally have used a very similar line to explain to people before in my life too. And
when I'm with Britney, I finally understand what people are talking about when they talk about love.
Again, I just cannot say enough good things about the representation through Santana and Britney, Naya Rivera, and Heather Morris. Obviously, everybody knows that in 2020, the world went through a very difficult time, and in July 2020, after a lot of the restrictions were lifted, Naya took her little 4-year-old son, Josie, to go out on a lake. They were going out on a pontoon boat. After Naya didn't return the boat, the people that rented the boat and the people watching the lake went out to search for Naya and her son, and they found her 4-year-old son Josie asleep on the boat that Naya had rented, and she was nowhere to be found. They ended up searching for Naya for almost a week, and then on the anniversary of Cory Monteith's death on July 13th, 2020, they found Naya Rivera's body. Naya's family, friends, and the Glee cast all turned up to try and support the search for Naya, and it was a really, really devastating end to this week-long search for her, and obviously her having such a young son too that had witnessed what happened to his mom. It's just a horrible, horrible situation all around, and the best sort of understanding of what happened is that they think Naya and her son went swimming, and I don't know a ton about boats, but pontoon boats, I'm sure most people have been on one or aware, they kind of sit on like skis, and although it was a calm day at the lake, the winds were around 21 miles an hour. So if you think a boat on skis and 21-mile-an-hour winds, they think that Naya and her son were swimming, and the boat kept being pushed away by the wind, obviously chasing after it, swimming, because Naya's family all said she was a great swimmer. So they think that just the wind was so strong that she just got exhausted, but yet she managed to save her son. And they think the exertion from swimming and her using the last of her strength to lift her son up onto the boat to safety is just what was too much, and she just couldn't keep going. So it's incredibly, incredibly sad, but what a hero that was able to save her son. Her ex-husband, Ryan Dorsey, who is the father of her son, did say Naya lives on in Josie. Naya's ex-husband did end up suing both the lake and the boat rental company, as over 26 people since the 1960s have passed away at that lake. They ended up settling for an undisclosed amount that will be kept in a trust for Naya's son. And that's what you missed on Glee. Honestly, there is so much more that I could say about this show. I could probably do 2 more videos on it, because even just looking at the behind the scenes drama and stuff, because certain cast members like Amber Riley and Chris Colfer, they got so many people attacking them on social media over like nothing. And then also individual cast members, if you spoke about them and their real life or things they've been involved with, like Queen Diana Agron, she has so much out there. She's like a big blind celebrity, and there's just a lot of stuff that's talked about on the internet with her and most of the cast, honestly. As I said earlier in the video, there's a lot of people who talk about this Glee curse. Do I think the show's cursed? No. I think that this production was absolutely enormous. Even just the cast, looking at like a regular TV show, the cast was huge throughout the 6 seasons, but also the crew to put this production together, I cannot imagine, because not only were they doing like a full 24 episode season most of the time, they also had the production to do all of the songs, the sets, the dance numbers. It was insane how many people had to work on this show. And with that amount of people, plus the enormous pressure that was on them because they were a global success, because it was a huge rating success in the beginning, and all the other factors of having to, work 17-hour days and turn these song and dance numbers over really quickly while also doing an entire TV production schedule, there is going to be enormous pressure on all of the people there. And with that many people, there are going to be some people who can't deal with that pressure, or they try and deal with the pressure in other ways, like substance abuse. And then when it comes to things like NAYA, like that was obviously a very, very tragic accident. It wasn't something that, you know, she did or someone else did. It was just a really awful thing that happened. And when you look at Mark Salling and Blake Jenner, obviously a cast of that size, a production of that size, there's going to be a few awful people in that. And a lot of the time, especially because they're actors, but even just awful regular people are really good at masking their true self sometimes. There are sadly a lot of awful people out there, and it's why it is so important to have people like Melissa speak out, because it is a lot more common than you think. And there are a lot of victims that go through things like Melissa went through. And it's why it's so important to be on the lookout for these things and to try and help anyone who's going through that. Believing victims and speaking up for them then also bleeds into Mark Salling. Obviously, he was doing horrendous things to his girlfriends, but he was also doing awful, horrendous, unforgivable things with these images of children. And I would get more into that, but that is what we're going to talk about in our next video, because I'm trying to do 2 a month now, and today's the 15th of March. I'm hoping to release this the 17th, and there's some information coming out the 17th, 18th that I've been waiting almost a year for it to come out, because I heard about this stuff quite a while ago, and I've been on and off working on this video for a long time. So that is coming at the end of this month, March, and I'm sure there's a really smart cookie out there who will be able to figure out what the topic is on because of that information about the release. So the next video should be out at the end of this month. If you don't want to miss the video, if you enjoyed this one, consider subscribing and follow me on social media, but absolutely no pressure. I really appreciate you watching and making it to the end. If you did, leave MVP below so I can personally thank you. And as always, make sure to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.